The Galactic Council chamber stretched wide and tall, filled with beings from 100 different worlds. And at the center of it all stood Lisa Morgan. Alone and frustrated beyond measure, she represented Earth, a world that had once sent proud ships into the deep darkness of space. And now she stood here, listening to aliens debate whether her people deserved basic military rights. Chancellor Vex leaned forward on his platform, his three eyes blinking in sequence as he spoke with that condescending tone Lisa had grown to hate. Ambassador Morgan, your request for fleet expansion is denied once again. Earth has proven itself unreliable in matters of deep space operations. Lisa's hands clenched at her sides, but she kept her voice level and professional. Chancellor, that incident happened 10 years ago. We've rebuilt our home defenses and proven our responsibility. Responsibility, Vex repeated, his translator giving the word a mocking quality. Your entire deep space fleet vanished without explanation. 847 ships, over 2 million personnel. Gone in a single day with no distress call and no survivors. The other council members whispered among themselves, and Lisa felt the weight of their judgment pressing down on her shoulders. She had heard this same argument dozens of times, and it never got easier to bear 10 years ago. Earth's fleet had been patrolling the Outer Rim, exploring new systems and establishing humanity's presence among the stars. Then one day, every ship went silent at exactly the same moment, and when rescue missions arrived at their last known positions, they found nothing at all. No debris, no bodies, no clues, just empty space where Earth's pride had been. We don't know what happened to them, Lisa admitted, because there was no point in lying. But we've investigated thoroughly and found no evidence of hostile action or mechanical failure. Exactly, Vex said, spreading his forearms wide. You don't know. Which suggests either catastrophic incompetence or deliberate desertion. Either way, it proves Earth cannot be trusted with military authority. So instead you suggest we accept protective status under Council forces, Lisa said, letting some of her anger show through now. You want us to surrender our sovereignty because of one unexplained incident. We suggest you accept reality. Earth is weak and alone. Under our protection, you would be safe. Lisa wanted to throw something at his smug alien face, but she maintained her composure because that was what her job required. Earth declines your generous offer. We will rebuild on our own. The council session ended badly, as most of them did these days, and Lisa returned to Earth's embassy feeling defeated and exhausted. She found Admiral Jake Harrison waiting for her in the conference room, looking at data displays with a concerned expression on his weathered face. How bad was it? He asked without looking up. Same as always. They think we're incompetent children who need supervision. Well, maybe this will change their minds. Harrison pulled up a new display showing deep space scanner readings, and Lisa moved closer to see what had caught his attention. What am I looking at? Dr. Amy Chun picked this up 3 hours ago. Energy readings from the edge of mapped space, right where the fleet disappeared. Lisa's breath caught in her throat, and she leaned in to study the data more carefully. That's impossible. We've scanned that region hundreds of times. I know, but Chun is certain about this. Something big is coming from that direction. The readings showed massive energy signatures moving at speeds that should have been impossible for ships of that size. Could it be the Dominion? Lisa asked, referring to the hostile empire that some frontier colonies had reported encountering wrong energy profile. These signatures match our old transponder codes. Lisa's heart started beating faster, and she pulled up the identification protocols herself to verify what Harrison was telling her. The computer confirmed it within seconds, and she had to sit down as the implications washed over her. It's our fleet. Some of it at least. But the energy readings are wrong. Those ships are putting out 10 times the power they should be capable of. How is that possible? I don't know. But we'll find out soon enough. At their current speed, they'll be in communication range within 6 hours. Lisa stood and started pacing, because she needed to move and think at the same time. We need to inform the council. Already done. Chun sent the data to all member species, as per standard protocols. How did Vex respond? He's calling an emergency session and mobilizing Council Defense Forces. He thinks they're hostile. He thinks they might be. 10 years missing, and suddenly they come back modified with unknown technology. It makes him nervous. Lisa understood the concern, but something in her gut told her this was different and important. There are people, Jake. Whatever happened to them out there, they're still our people. I hope you're right, because if you're wrong, we might be facing our own fleet as enemies. 6 hours later, Lisa stood in Dr. Amy Chen's laboratory watching the main display as the approaching fleet began transmitting on old Earth military frequencies. Chun was a small woman with quick movements and an even quicker mind. Right now, she looked both excited and terrified as she worked her controls. Audio coming through now. The speakers crackled with static, and then a voice emerged. Human and male, but harder than any voice Lisa had heard before. This is Captain Peter Grant of the EFS. Defiant to any Earth vessel receiving this transmission. We are requesting permission to approach home system. Lisa grabbed the microphone before anyone could stop her. Captain Grant. This is Ambassador Lisa Morgan. Earth is receiving you. What is your status? There was a pause that felt like forever. Ambassador. Good to hear a familiar voice. Our status is operational, but we have much to report. Request immediate meeting with Earth leadership. Captain, you've been gone for 10 years. Where have you been? Another pause, and this time, when Grant spoke, his voice carried a weight that made Lisa's skin prickle. We've been at war, Ambassador. And we need to talk before it comes here. The transmission ended and Lisa looked at Harrison and Chun, seeing her own shock reflected in their faces. Get me a channel to the council, she said quietly. They need to hear this. Within an hour, the council was in emergency session, and Lisa stood before them again. But this time, she wasn't asking for anything. Main display showed the approaching fleet, and even the most skeptical council members fell silent when they saw what was coming. The ships were wrong. Modified beyond recognition, with armor plating that gleamed dark and hostile, weapons bristling from every surface, and energy signatures that made their sensors scream warnings. What have your people done? Vex demanded, his voice shaking slightly with what might have been fear. I don't know yet, but we're about to find out. Lisa opened a channel to the lead ship, and this time Captain Grant's face appeared on the screen. Looked older, much older than 10 years should have made him. With scars running across his face and eyes that had seen things Lisa couldn't imagine. Captain Grant, the Galactic Council is ordering your fleet to hold position and explain your modifications. Grant looked past her at the assembled council members, and his expression didn't change at all. With respect, Ambassador, we're not taking orders from the council. We're coming home. Captain, please. They're threatening military action if you don't comply. Let them try. The transmission cut, and Lisa watched helplessly as the fleet continued its approach. Not slowing down, not deviating from course. He's bluffing, Vex said. But he didn't sound convinced. Order your home fleet to intercept them, Harrison. The Admiral looked at Lisa, and she could see the question in his eyes. She thought about Grant's voice, about the scars on his face, about ships that glowed with power beyond anything Earth had built. Stand down, she ordered quietly. Let them come home. The fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel like ghosts rising from deep water, and every sensor in council space screamed alerts as the ships materialized in formation. Captain Peter Grant stood on the bridge of the EFS Defiant, watching Earth grow larger on the main screen, and feeling nothing but a cold determination that had kept him alive for 30 years. Sir, We're receiving multiple hails from Council Defense Forces. Commander Nicole Barnes reported from her station, her voice as steady and hard as his own. Ignore them. They're powering weapons. Let them. If they fire, we'll know they're not worth saving. Barnes nodded and turned back to her console because after 3 decades of fighting together, they understood each other perfectly. The Defiance Bridge was nothing like the clean, bright spaces that Earth ships used to have. Now everything was dark metal and glowing displays, built for function rather than comfort. Built for war. Grant looked at his reflection in a dark panel and barely recognized the man staring back. When he'd left Earth, he had been 32 years old, optimistic and eager to explore the galaxy. Now he was 62, scarred inside and out, and he had forgotten what optimism felt like. Sir, Ambassador Morgan is requesting direct communication. Put her through. Lisa Morgan's face appeared on the screen, and Grant saw her eyes widen slightly as she took in his appearance. Captain Grant, the Council is demanding you stop and submit to inspection. The Council can demand whatever they want, Ambassador. We're coming home and nothing is going to stop us. Peter, please, they're scared. Your ships look like weapons platforms. That's because they are. We didn't have the luxury of peaceful exploration where we've been. He saw. Lisa glanced at something off-screen and then looked back at him with growing concern. Where have you been? What happened to your fleet? Grant considered his words carefully because the truth was almost impossible to believe. We went beyond the outer rim like we were ordered. We found something out there, something that's been waiting in the dark for a very long time. What did you find? An empire called the Dominion. And they don't negotiate or trade. They conquer and consume. Behind Lisa, he could see council members gathering, their alien faces showing various expressions of disbelief and suspicion. Chancellor Vex pushed forward into view, his 3 eyes fixed on Grant with obvious hostility. Captain Grant, you will explain these modifications to your vessels immediately. We modified our ships to survive, Chancellor. Where we've been, pretty holes and diplomatic niceties get you killed fast. You were gone for 10 years. How did you accomplish such extensive rebuilding? 10 years, Grant repeated, and he felt something cold settle in his chest. Is that how long it's been here? Lisa nodded slowly, and Grant saw Barnes turn to look at him with understanding dawning in her eyes. Time runs differently in the region we were trapped in, Grant explained, keeping his voice level despite the emotions churning inside him. For you, it's been 10 years. For us, it's been 30. The council chamber erupted in noise as dozens of species started talking at once, and Grant waited patiently for them to quiet down. That's impossible, Max finally declared. You're lying to excuse whatever you've been doing out there. Believe what you want, Chancellor. The physics don't care about your opinions. Grant nodded to Barnes, and she brought up a recording they had prepared for this moment. The council fell silent as images filled their screens, showing things that no civilized species should ever have to see. Massive ships, each one larger than anything the council had ever built. Weapons that tore through shields like paper. Planets burning under orbital bombardment. This is what we found, Grant said quietly. This is what's been building its strength while you've been playing politics and trade. Negotiations. The images shifted to show Earth's fleet in battle. Ships exploding, people dying, desperate fights in the cold vacuum of space. We were exploring a new system when they found us. They didn't warn us or give us time to leave. They just attacked. Grant watched the council members staring at the footage and saw fear growing in their eyes. We lost 200 ships in the first week. We were surrounded, cut off, trapped in a region where time moved differently, and the Dominion hunted US like animals. The recording showed the fleet's transformation over years of constant warfare. Sleek exploration vessels becoming brutal weapons of survival. We had 2 choices: adapt or die, so we learned to salvage their technology. We learned to fight the way they fight. We learned to become something we never wanted to be. The images showed boarding actions, hand-to-hand fighting in alien corridors, humans doing terrible things because the alternative was extinction. For 30 years, we fought and ran and fought again, losing people every single day, watching friends die and ships burn, all while knowing we might never see home again. Grant's voice had gone flat and emotionless because that was the only way he could talk about it. But we survived. We learned their weaknesses. We became better at killing than they were. And eventually, we found a way to break free and come home. He gestured at the screen, showing his scarred and modified fleet. This is what war does, Ambassador. This is what becomes necessary when the alternative is death. Vex recovered his composure first, his political instincts overriding his fear. Even if we believe your story, Captain, the Dominion is far away. They're not our concern. Not your concern? Grant repeated, his voice taking on an edge that made several council members flinch. They're expanding, Chancellor, moving through systems one by one. And they're heading this direction. How do you know this? Because we interrogated their commanders before we killed them. Because we accessed their databases and saw their invasion maps. Because we spent 30 years learning everything about them while you sat here, safe and ignorant. Barnes pulled up another display. This one showing projected invasion routes based on Dominion patterns. According to our analysis, advance forces will reach Council space in approximately 5 years. The Council chamber erupted again, but Grant just watched them with cold detachment. They reminded him of the person he used to be, soft and unprepared, thinking the galaxy was a place where reason and diplomacy solved every problem. We came back to warn you, he said, his voice cutting through the noise. We came back to give you time to prepare. We came back because, despite everything, Earth still believes the galaxy is worth saving. How generous, Vex said sarcastically. And I suppose you want us to hand over military authority to you, based on this convenient threat. Grant smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I don't want anything from you, Chancellor. I'm telling you what's coming. What you do with that information is your choice. He signaled Barnes to cut the transmission, and the Council's faces disappeared from the screen. Do you think they believed us? She asked. Some of them. Enough of them, maybe. But it doesn't matter. Why not? Because we're not waiting for their permission to prepare. We're going to do what we came back to do regardless of what they decide. Grant looked out at Earth. So close now, and felt something stir in his chest that might have been hope. Get me Admiral Harrison. It's time to start training the home fleet. Sir, the Council will see that as an act of aggression. Let them. We didn't survive 30 years of hell to watch our homeworld burn because politicians couldn't make hard decisions. The Defiant and her sister ships moved into orbit around Earth, and for the first time in 3 decades, Peter Grant allowed himself to believe they might actually have a chance. But that night, alone in his quarters, he pulled up casualty reports from the past 30 years and read through names of people who would never see home again. 2 million personnel had left Earth. Less than 1 million had returned, and every single survivor carried scars that would never fully heal. We're home, he whispered to the empty room. We made it back, but the war had come home with them. And Grant knew this was just the beginning of a much longer and harder fight. The Dominion was coming, and the galaxy had no idea what was heading their way. Earth's orbital station had never been built to handle this many people at once, and Lisa Morgan watched families reuniting with loved ones who had aged decades, while they waited only years. A woman in her 40s embraced a man in his 60s who she had married when they were both young and fresh-faced. Children who barely remembered their parents met strangers with familiar eyes and unfamiliar scars. Lisa stood near the docking port and felt tears threatening as she witnessed joy mixed with profound grief because these people had lost Time they could never get back. It's harder than the fighting, Captain Peter Grant said quietly beside her. Coming home and realizing everything moved on without you. I can't imagine what you've been through. Good. I hope you never have to. Grant gestured for her to follow him, and they walked through corridors filled with veterans who moved with a wariness that civilian spaces never required. Every person they passed had the same look in their eyes, constantly scanning for threats, hands never far from where weapons would normally be carried. I want to show you what we built, Grant said as they entered a shuttle that would take them to the Defiant. The flagship was even more imposing up close, its hull covered in repair scars and armor plating that had been added and modified. Countless times Commander Nicole Barnes met them at the airlock, her mechanical right arm moving with perfect precision as she saluted Ambassador Morgan. Welcome aboard. What happened to your arm? Lisa asked before she could stop herself. Lost it in the Battle of Broken Hope. Dominion Plasma Cutter took it off at the shoulder. I was lucky compared to most. They walked through the ship, and Lisa tried not to stare at the modifications that turned every corridor into a potential fighting position. This vessel was originally a science ship, Grant explained. Now it's one of our heaviest combat platforms. He led her to the engineering section, where a woman with burn scars covering half her face worked on what looked like a weapon system beyond anything Earth had designed. This is engineer Karen Walsh. She's the reason we survived as long as we did. Karen looked up and smiled, the scarred side of her face pulling the expression into something unsettling. Ambassador. Good to meet you. The captain says you're trying to convince the council to listen. Trying being the key word. Well, maybe this will help. Karen activated a display showing weapon specifications. That made Lisa's head spin with their complexity. This is a hybrid plasma cannon built from salvaged Dominion components and human engineering. It can punch through shields that would stop our old weapons cold. How did you learn to build this? Trial and error mostly. We'd capture enemy tech, take it apart, figure out how it worked, then rebuild it to fit our ships. I did most of my learning while under fire with people dying around me. The casual way, Karen said. It made Lisa's stomach turn, because this woman was talking about horror, like it was just another day at work. How many of these do you have? Every ship in the fleet has at least 2. Some of the bigger vessels have 6 or more. Grant led Lisa deeper into the ship, and they entered the Marine quarters where soldiers trained in hand-to-hand combat with an intensity that seemed excessive for a space. Vessel Colonel Daniel Price stood watching them, his legs replaced below the knees with advanced prosthetics that moved like natural limbs. Colonel, this is Ambassador Morgan. Daniel saluted sharply, and Lisa noticed his eyes never stopped scanning the room even while talking to her. Ma'am, the captain told us you'd be visiting. What happened to your legs? Dominion boarding action. They use these crawling mines that latch onto you and explode. Took my legs and killed 3 of my squad before we stopped them. He said it matter-of-factly, like losing limbs was just an inconvenience rather than a tragedy. The colonel led the assault that captured our first Dominion command ship, Grant added. That's where we got most of our intelligence about their invasion plans. It wasn't pretty, Daniel said, his expression darkening. Dominion don't surrender and they don't take prisoners. Every room we cleared was a fight to the death. How do you deal with that? You don't really. You just keep moving forward because stopping means thinking, and thinking means remembering. A young man approached them, barely looking old enough to be in uniform, but his eyes held that same 1,000-yard stare Lisa had seen in all the veterans. Lieutenant Stephen Park. Grant introduced him. One of our best fighter pilots, sir, Stephen acknowledged before turning to Lisa. Ambassador, how old are you, Lieutenant? 32, ma'am. I was 14 when we left Earth. Lisa felt her breath catch because this young man had grown up knowing nothing but war. You've been fighting since you were 14. Yes, ma'am. Everyone fought once we realized we weren't going home anytime soon. Age didn't matter when the alternative was dying. What was it like? Growing up out there? Stephen's expression went distant and cold. I don't remember much of Earth. Mostly I remember training, fighting, watching people die. Learning to kill before the enemy killed me. That's my childhood ambassador. He excused himself and walked away, leaving Lisa shaken by the implications of what she'd just heard. There's a whole generation like him, Grant explained quietly. Kids who became soldiers because they had no choice, who learned math by calculating firing solutions and learned physics by understanding weapon systems. They continued to tour, and everywhere Lisa looked, she saw the same story repeated in different forms: people who had been forced to become something they never wanted to be, who had survived by becoming harder and colder and more efficient at killing. We lost over half our people, Grant said as they stood in a memorial hall lined with names. Every single ship suffered casualties. Every family lost someone. Lisa looked at the endless list of names and felt overwhelmed by the scale of the loss. How do you keep going after losing so much? Because if we stop, if we give up, then they died for nothing. We came back to protect Earth and the galaxy. That's what keeps us moving. They returned to the bridge, and Grant pulled up tactical displays showing Council space and the Dominion's projected invasion routes. We estimate 18 months before their advance forces arrive. 5 years before the main fleet. If the Council doesn't prepare, billions will die. Chancellor Vex thinks you're exaggerating the threat. Vex is a fool who's never seen real war. He thinks politics and negotiations can solve everything. Some of the other council members believe you. They're sending observers to learn from your people. Good. We'll teach anyone willing to learn. But they need to understand this isn't going to be like the border skirmishes they're used to. Lawrence approached with a datapad, and her expression was grim. Sir, Deep Scouts just sent a priority transmission. Grant read the report, and Lisa saw his jaw tighten. What is it? Dominion Advance Forces. They're ahead of schedule. We have maybe 18 months before first contact. Possibly less. He looked at Lisa with those hard, scarred eyes. Time to decide, Ambassador. Is Earth going to wait for Council permission, or are we going to do what needs to be done? Lisa thought about everything she'd seen. The scars and the losses. The people who had given up 30 years of their lives fighting an enemy the galaxy didn't even know existed. What do you need from me, political cover? When we start training the home fleet and sharing our technology, Vex is going to scream about unauthorized military buildup. Let him scream. You're right. We can't wait. Grant nodded with something that might have been approval. Welcome to the War Ambassador. Over the following weeks, Lisa watched as the Warborn veterans began training Earth's home fleet in tactics that seemed brutal and ruthless compared to standard procedures. Admiral Michelle Rodriguez struggled with the concepts at first, her training emphasizing honor and rules of engagement. This isn't fighting, she protested after one particularly harsh simulation. This is survival at any cost. Exactly, Grant replied. The Dominion doesn't care about your honor. They care about winning. And if you fight them with one hand tied behind your back, you'll lose. But there have to be lines we don't cross. There are. We don't target civilians. We don't torture prisoners. We don't commit atrocities. But we also don't give the enemy any advantage we can deny them. Rodriguez watched her crews learning to exploit every weakness, to adapt tactics on the fly, to think like predators rather than professionals. It feels wrong. It is wrong, Grant agreed. War is wrong. Killing is wrong. But the alternative is letting everyone die. So you choose the lesser evil and learn to live with it. The training continued, and slowly, Rodriguez began to understand what the Warborn had learned through decades of hard experience. Meanwhile, other Council species started sending their own observers, quietly approaching Lisa to request access to Earth's military knowledge. They're scared. Ambassador Kale told her during a private meeting. Vex can deny it all he wants, but the smart ones see what's coming. Will they support us when it matters? Some will. Others won't commit until they have no choice. Typical council politics. Lisa looked out at the Warborn fleet in orbit and made her decision. Then we prepare the ones willing to learn and hope it's enough. Grant had been right. Vex screamed about Earth building an illegal coalition. Threatening sanctions and military action. Lisa's response was simple and direct. We're trying to save you. Get out of our way. The battle lines were drawn. Not between species, but between those who saw the threat coming and those who refused to believe until it was too late. The council vote came down exactly as Lisa Morgan had expected, with Chancellor Vex leading the majority in rejecting Earth's proposal for joint defense preparations. The council orders Earth's fleet to decommission all unauthorized weapons and return to pre-disappearance military status. Vex declared from his platform, his 3 eyes gleaming with satisfaction. Lisa didn't even bother responding. She simply gathered her datapads and walked out of the chamber while Vex was still talking behind her. She could hear his outraged protests, but she was done playing political games while a threat gathered in the dark. Captain Peter Grant was waiting outside the council building, leaning against a transport with his arms crossed and a knowing look on his scarred face. They said no. They said no. Good. Lisa stopped and stared at him because that was not the response she had expected. Good? Peter, they're threatening to use force against us. Let them try. We survived the Dominion for 30 years. The Council's toy soldiers don't scare me. He pushed off from the transport and started walking toward the shuttle pad. Come on. We have work to do regardless of what those fools decided. Back on Earth. Admiral Michelle Rodriguez gathered her fleet commanders in a secure briefing room while Grant and his senior staff laid out their training program. What we're proposing goes against every regulation in the book, Rodriguez said, looking at the tactical plans with obvious concern. Regulations are written by people who've never faced real combat. Commander Nicole Barnes replied, her mechanical arm resting on the table. We're offering to teach you what actually works. The Council will see this as an act of rebellion. The Council can see it however they want, Grant said flatly. In 18 months, maybe less, Dominion advance forces are going to hit a Council colony. When that happens, every species is going to be screaming for help. We're making sure Earth can provide it. Rodriguez studied the hard faces around the table and made her decision. All right. We do this, but I want full transparency with my crews. No secrets about what we're learning or why. Fair enough. Over the following months, Earth's orbital facilities transformed into training grounds where Warborn veterans taught home fleet personnel how to fight like they had fought. The gap between the two groups became obvious immediately. Home fleet officers were professional and competent, but they fought with caution and by-the-book tactics. The Warborn fought like cornered animals, exploiting every advantage, taking risks that seemed insane until they paid off. You're thinking too much, Lieutenant Stephen Park told a frustrated fighter pilot during a simulation. Stop trying to fly perfectly and start trying to survive. I can't just throw away my training. Your training is going to get you killed. The Dominion doesn't care about your perfect formation flying. They care about overwhelming you with numbers and firepower. Stephen reset the simulation and this time flew alongside the pilot, demonstrating tactics that seemed reckless until the results spoke for themselves. See? You're still alive, and the enemy isn't. That's the only metric that matters. The pilot ran the simulation again, this time incorporating Stephen's aggressive approach, and watched their survival time double similar. Scenes played out across the fleet as Warborn veterans shared hard-won knowledge with people who had never faced combat engineer. Karen Walsh held workshops on battlefield repairs, teaching mechanics how to keep ships running with half their systems destroyed. You won't have time to do it right, she explained while demonstrating emergency patches. You'll have minutes at most before the next attack. So learn to do it fast and good enough to survive. Colonel Daniel Price ran Marine units through boarding scenarios that left regular soldiers shaken and exhausted. The Dominion fights in close quarters like nothing you've trained for, he said while watching troops struggle through a simulation. They're faster, stronger, and they don't stop coming until you kill them completely. How do we fight something like that? Fire discipline, overlapping fields of fire, and the willingness to do whatever it takes. Hesitation gets your whole squad killed. Word of Earth's training program spread through the galaxy, and other species started approaching Lisa with quiet requests. Ambassador Kale brought a delegation of military observers from his species, all of them eager to learn from the Warborn. My government doesn't officially support this, he explained privately. But unofficially, we're terrified of what you've described. Smart, Lisa replied. Get your people trained while there's still time. More species followed, sending observers who watched Earth's tactics with a mixture of horror and fascination. They saw the brutal efficiency, the willingness to sacrifice anything except victory, the cold calculation that turned every battle into a problem to be solved rather than a contest to be won. This is how you survived, one alien officer said to Grant after observing a particularly vicious training exercise. This is how we're all going to survive, Grant corrected, or die trying. Meanwhile, Commander Brandon Hayes worked with intelligence teams analyzing every scrap of data the Warborn had collected about the Dominion. Their advanced forces follow predictable patterns, he briefed Earth's leadership. 3 scout fleets, heavy firepower, designed to overwhelm local defenses quickly. How do we counter them? We don't try to match their strength. We use mobility and surprise. Hit them where they're weak and disappear before they can respond. Guerrilla tactics. Exactly. We learned the hard way that standing and trading blows with Dominion ships is suicide. You have to fight smart, not strong. Hayes pulled up projections showing likely targets for the first Dominion assault. Based on their previous expansion patterns, they'll hit this colony system first. It's rich in resources and lightly defended. When 6 weeks, maybe 8, our deep scouts are tracking there. Movement. Grant studied the tactical display with the expression of a man who had fought this enemy too many times to count. We need to be there when they arrive. The Council will never authorize it. Then we go without authorization. Rodriguez looked uncomfortable, but didn't argue because she had learned enough to trust Grant's judgment. How many ships? Everything we can spare. This is our chance to show the galaxy what's coming and prove we're not exaggerating the threat. And if we fail, then the Dominion takes the colony and billions of people learn the hard way that we were telling the truth. But we're not going to fail. Grant assembled his fleet commanders and laid out the mission parameters with characteristic bluntness. We're going to war without Council approval. Some of you will die. The ones who survive will be heroes or criminals, depending on how this plays out. Anyone who wants out can leave now with no judgment. Nobody moved. Good. We launch in 48 hours. Use the time to say goodbye to anyone who matters. Lisa watched the preparations with growing anxiety, because she knew this was the point of no return if Earth's fleet engaged the Dominion without authorization. The political consequences would be severe. But if they didn't, countless lives would be lost. Chancellor Vex called an emergency session demanding Earth stand down, but Lisa ignored the summons instead. She stood on the observation deck of the Defiant, watching crews perform final checks on weapon systems that glowed with barely contained power. You sure about this? She asked Grant quietly. No, but I'm sure about what happens if we do nothing. The Council will never forgive us. I don't need their forgiveness. I need them to survive long enough to realize we were right. Barnes approached with a final status report. All ships ready, Captain. We can jump on your order. Grant looked out at the fleet that had been forged in 30 years of warfare, scarred and modified. Crewed by people who knew the cost of failure. Then let's go save some people who don't even know they need saving. The fleet jumped to faster than light, and Lisa felt her stomach drop because this was really happening. Earth was going to war. And win or lose, nothing would ever be the same. 6 weeks later, they arrived at the sanctuary system, just as Dominion advance forces emerged from their own FTL transit to colony's defense. Forces were already scrambling to respond, but they were pathetically outnumbered and outgunned. This is Captain Peter Grant to Sanctuary Defense Command. Earth Fleet is here to assist. Earth Fleet? We didn't request assistance. You're about to. Trust me. The Dominion ships opened fire and Lisa watched as colony defenses that had seemed impressive moments ago evaporated under the assault. Then Earth's Warborn fleet dropped out of stealth positions and everything changed. The Battle of Sanctuary began with Dominion confidence and ended with Dominion ships burning in the void. And in between those 2 points, Earth's Warborn fleet showed the galaxy what 30 years of warfare had created. Captain Peter Grant stood on the bridge of the Defiant, watching tactical displays light up with hostile contacts while his crew moved with practiced efficiency around him. Dominion Vanguard is breaking into 3 assault groups. Commander Nicole Barnes reported, her mechanical fingers dancing across her console. They're going for standard overwhelming force tactics. Of course they are. It usually works for them. Grant opened fleet-wide communications, and his voice carried to every ship under his command. All vessels. Execute pattern Sierra 7. Make them think we're running scared. The Earth fleet broke formation and appeared to scatter in panic. Exactly the response the Dominion expected from inferior forces. They're taking the bait, Barnes said with satisfaction. Good. Let them get cocky. Lisa Morgan watched from the observation deck as Dominion ships pursued what they thought were fleeing enemies. Their formations spreading out to maximize coverage. She had seen recordings of Warborn tactics, but watching them in real time was something else entirely. Now, Grant ordered quietly, Earth's scattered ships suddenly reversed course, and each one targeted a different Dominion vessel with weapons that the enemy had never encountered. The 4 Karen Walsh's hybrid plasma cannons tore through shields that should have held. Admiral Michelle Rodriguez coordinated her home fleet ships with precision that surprised even Grant. And everywhere the Dominion looked, they found enemies who fought with a viciousness that spoke of long experience. Direct hit on their command ship, Barnes reported. Their coordination is degrading. Send in the Marines. Colonel Daniel Price led assault shuttles toward crippled Dominion vessels. His teams moving with the deadly efficiency of people who had done this hundreds of times before. Breaching now. Daniel's voice came through the com. Heavy resistance, but we're pushing through. Lisa heard the sounds of combat in the background. Weapons fire and shouted orders. And tried not to imagine what was happening in those alien corridors. Command deck secured. Daniel reported minutes later. Uploading their tactical data now. Grant smiled coldly, because this was exactly what they had done during the 30 years in the void. Adapt and exploit every advantage, Lieutenant Park. Take your squadron and hit their weapon platforms. Yes, sir. Stephen Park led a flight of fighters in maneuvers that seemed impossible. Dodging fire with reflexes honed by growing up in combat, his squadron wove through the battle space like they were dancing. Each ship supporting the others in patterns that regular pilots struggled to follow. Target destroyed. Moving to next objective, Rodriguez commanded her section of the fleet with growing confidence. incorporating Warborn tactics into her own strategic thinking. This is insane, she muttered while watching her ships perform maneuvers she would have called suicidal a month ago. But it's working. That's what we've been trying to tell you, Barnes replied over the command channel. Sometimes insane is the only thing that works. The battle raged for 3 hours, and the Dominion forces slowly realized they were fighting something they had never encountered. Before, these weren't soft council species with rigid tactics and predictable responses. These were predators who fought with the same ruthless efficiency the Dominion prided themselves on. Enemy flagship is trying to withdraw, Barnes reported. Don't let them. I want them to report back exactly how badly they got beaten. The Defiant pursued the fleeing command ship, and Grant watched his weapons officer line up the perfect shot fire. Karen's plasma cannons carved through the Dominion ship's engines, and it tumbled helplessly in space. Hail them. The enemy commander appeared on screen, his alien features twisted with rage and confusion. You fight without honor. Honor is for species that can afford it, Grant replied. We fight to survive and protect. That's the only honor that matters. He cut the transmission and ordered the ship disabled, but not destroyed. Let them run home and tell their masters what happened here. As the battle wound down, Lisa looked at the tactical display showing Dominion ships destroyed or fleeing, Earth's fleet battered but victorious. And the sanctuary colony saved. Casualties had been heavy on both sides, but Grant had predicted that. The difference was Earth's people knew how to win while bleeding. Sanctuary Defense Command is requesting to speak with you, Barnes said. Grant nodded, and a grateful alien commander appeared on screen. Captain Grant, we owe you our lives. The Dominion would have destroyed everything. Just remember this when the Council tries to claim we're the aggressors. I don't understand. You will throughout Council space. Species had been monitoring the battle through long-range sensors, and now they watched the aftermath with growing understanding. Chancellor Vex called an emergency session, and his face showed barely controlled fury when Grant's transmission appeared on the main display. You attacked without authorization. We saved a colony while you sat here debating protocols. You're welcome, by the way. You violated every military accord and treaty, and saved billions of lives in the process. But please, continue telling me how I should have let them die while waiting for your permission. Lisa stood beside Grant during the transmission and watched the council members arguing among themselves. Some were clearly grateful, others outraged. But all of them were scared because they had just seen proof that the Dominion was real and coming. The evidence is clear. Ambassador Kale spoke up, his voice cutting through the chaos. Captain Grant and his fleet saved Sanctuary. The Dominion is a legitimate threat. And Earth has been telling the truth. Even if that's true, Vex protested weakly. They still acted without authority because you refused to give it. How many more colonies should burn while you debate? The Council descended into arguments that Grant ignored because he didn't care about their politics anymore. Ambassador, Morgan has full tactical reports and recordings of the battle, he said, interrupting Vex's tirade. Study them. Learn from them or don't. The choice is yours. But the Dominion won't wait for you to decide. He ended the transmission and turned to Barnes. How many ships did we lose? 14 destroyed. 23 severely damaged. Casualty reports are still coming in, but it looks like around 3,000 dead or wounded. Grant felt each number like a physical blow because he knew most of those people personally. Get rescue teams to the damaged ships. Priority on medical evacuation. Already underway, sir. Lisa approached him quietly while the bridge crew worked. You knew it would cost this much. I knew it would cost more if we waited. 3,000 lives now or 3 billion lives later. It's simple math. That doesn't make it easier. No, it doesn't. Over the following days, the Council held session after session, debating Earth's actions while trying to process what the battle had revealed. Multiple species sent delegations to Earth requesting military assistance and training. Even Vex's supporters began quietly asking questions about Warborn tactics. "They're scared," Kale told Lisa during one of their private meetings. "They saw what the Dominion can do, and they saw how Earth fought back. Will they officially support us? The vote is tomorrow." "I think we have the numbers." The vote came down in Earth's favor by a narrow margin, with the Council grudgingly accepting Earth's military assistance in preparing for Dominion invasion. Vex made one last attempt to maintain control by demanding Earth submit to Council oversight. Grant's response was, "Delivered personally before the entire Assembly. We'll work with any species that wants to learn how to survive. We'll share our tactics and technology. We'll fight alongside you when the Dominion comes. But we won't submit to your authority. You're demanding independence. We earned it 30 years ago when we survived what should have killed us. We're not your subordinates anymore, Chancellor. We're your best chance at survival. Learn to accept that." The Council had no choice but to agree because the alternative was facing the Dominion alone in the weeks that followed. Earth's Warborn fleet became the nucleus of a new defensive alliance. Species that had never worked together, unified by the common threat approaching from beyond known space. Lisa stood with Grant on the Defiance observation deck, watching as mixed fleets trained together under Warborn instruction. "Do you think it will be enough?" "I think we'll find out soon enough. The Dominion doesn't stop. They'll send bigger forces now that we've bloodied them. Are you afraid?" Grant considered the question. "Seriously, every day. But fear keeps you sharp. It's when you stop being afraid that you make fatal mistakes." He looked out at Earth hanging in space. "So beautiful and fragile. We spent 30 years fighting to get back here. Fought through things that should have broken us. Lost people who deserve better. All because we refused to give up. And now we do it again. But this time, we're not alone. We have allies and time to prepare. That's more than we had before." Rodriguez approached with status reports, showing impressive progress in joint training exercises. The coalition forces are adapting faster than expected. Having experienced combat troops to learn from makes all the difference. Good. They're going to need every advantage when the main Dominion fleet arrives. Lisa looked at the two commanders, both scarred by war in different ways, both committed to protecting a galaxy that had doubted them.